All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from Europe, Italy, Milan, by Chris Peterson. How you doing, Chris?
Very good, John. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. I think you're probably the first person we've had from who's come on that's been in Milan. We have people from all over the world, but I think it's a first for Milan. And Chris is the co-founder of LifeMind, an AI agent platform designed for national, local, and regional markets. Over 30 years experience as a marketing pioneer and entrepreneur. Started two digital marketing agencies. And has earned recognition from the Wall Street Journal, Publicis Group, later acquired the agency. Chris has established an early content marketing agency before the term became mainstream. And you're the author of the book Red and Blue Customers, which is
That's right.
just updated on March 20th. And for those of you who outside of the States, it's red and blue here obviously relates to both sides of the political equation, but you can apply that to whatever country you're in and whatever colors they whatever colors they adopt. But we all know that we live in an extremely polarized world, a very politically polarized world, probably the most polarized it's ever been because of access to social media and communication tools, etc., and the state of the media today, and how it's gone, how we've gone into the era of where it's all about emotion, really, isn't it, at the end of the day? And so what we're going to talk about today is how businesses can navigate political polarization without alienating consumers. And this is a fascinating topic, Chris, because I feel like, politics has I mean, it's infiltrated everything, and everything has a political connotation today. I mean, we're seeing it today here with, say, like with Tesla, right? Tesla was the darling of one group of people. Then the founder bought X, went over there. Now those people who loved it hate it, and those people who maybe didn't care about it love it, and and it's become a very bizarre world to navigate.
hmm Yeah, it has, and it's something, to your point, it's something we see every day. It's right in front of us. It's in the news. We have conversations with friends and family about it, whether we're more liberal or conservative. And yet, the differences in the two groups are generally not applied in business and in
Mhm.
marketing. And when I first started the project of writing the book, I just became fascinated by it because there's overwhelming evidence that the two groups, liberal and conservative, broadly defined, buy different products, align with different brands, consume different media, not exclusively, but
Mhm.
the trends are very strong. And yet, as businesses, we put that aside as politics when in fact, really what we have to focus on are the values that each side has that they use to navigate life. And politics is just an expression of those values. And so it becomes a really interesting way to think about markets and customers and creating a far stronger fit between your business, what you're selling, and the customer or the market that you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting observation because I mean, once upon a time, uh, I don't think anybody most people didn't relate products, or didn't think of products and politics together, right? They didn't say, like, I'm going to buy from this company as opposed to this company because I like where they stand on these issues or that issues. Like, we didn't really think about that, but today it's become very apparent, as you said, that people will make their choices. They'll even buy maybe a lesser quality, more expensive product based on where the company sits on the political spectrum, and that's a very different environment.
It is. And it could be driven by maybe an overt political stance,
Hmm.
or it could be something even far more subtle, because the big trend that's happened in the United States and around the world is that people have effectively sorted themselves into being more liberal or more conservative. Yes, there are moderate people, a strong majority are moderate, but the market and people in general have sorted themselves. And so as a result, brands, businesses, marketers, salespeople have to figure out, well, is my market more liberal or conservative? What about my customers today? Are they more liberal or conservative? So you have to kind of answer these questions in order to understand where they fall, and not just because of avoiding or bringing up politics, but to understand the core values that they have when they decide what type of product that they want to buy. So it can even be, something far more subtle. Like, for example, Harris every year comes out with the brands that have the most trust between the two different groups. And so, so like Target has far more brand trust with liberal customers, and Home Depot has more trust with more conservative customers. And on the surface, that can feel like it makes sense now, but clearly there's still liberal people shopping at Home
Sure.
Depot and vice versa at Target. But what it does is it creates a way of understanding, like, how a business aligns with the market, where the tailwind or headwind might be, and then figuring out how to navigate that so you can drive growth, and create more tailwinds for your business by understanding your customers and your markets better on using this dimension.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because I mean, I would also argue today that right and left, it doesn't really make any sense anymore because there's so, the people have divided themselves into these groups, but within that, you'll find that there's some people who agree with some things over here and some things, and those kind of
Yeah.
binary choices don't really make sense anymore. And I think that may create an opportunity for some businesses to be able to kind of thread the middle, if you like.
Yeah, and there are ways to do that. There are values, as detailed in the book, that are actually core American values,
Mhm.
where that unify the two groups. So a business can actually decide, to maybe focus more on one group than the other. And I'll give you an example. Like, we're working with a fitness company right now, which on the surface, you wouldn't think of it as being political one way or the other, but the product happens to appeal to a more conservative audience almost overwhelmingly after looking at the data. And then we're also looking at a mobile application company where the opposite is true. On
Mhm.
the surface, you don't see politics, but you see in the customer data, they're overwhelmingly more liberal. But you can also attempt to attract both groups by using core American values, which we've researched. And there are things like friendliness and informality and competition and ingenuity, and there are others detailed in the book. But I have to point out that both markets, liberal and conservative in the United States, because that's what the
Yeah.
focus of the book is on, but it can apply to other countries. Both markets are great, then they're both huge. So if each of those two markets was a country, they would be the 10th largest in the world. And they both have equal spending power. So liberal customers have higher income, but they also have higher cost of living. And when you net out cost of living with homeownership and mortgages and cost of food, they actually both have equal spending power. So an opportunity can be to align more with one or the other because the market is there for it.
Mhm.
And sometimes it happens naturally. Like, there's a company called apartments.com, which is kind of a central location for finding apartments to rent, right? And well, apartment renters happen to be in higher population density areas. Therefore, they skew more liberal, without a doubt, because simple geography often can guide you in terms of where the market is. And their advertising and marketing and sales is also very liberal skewing. So they have Jeff Goldblum as a celebrity spokesperson talking about the future and reinventing the future. That is really strong alignment for them, and that creates a tailwind. And then there are similar stories on the conservative side as well. Like, WeatherTech is a very successful company
Mhm.
with a fairly conservative image in terms of its marketing and sales. And car owners skew a little conservative, so they sell rubber mats for cars,
Yeah.
for people who don't know.
Great
Um,
products,
but
actually.
Yeah, very well-made products, and of course, they point out that they're made in the USA, and and that helps appeal to a more conservative audience. But they also, often you can look at the founders of a business to determine where it originally came from, and
Hmm.
that sometimes you get lucky, the alignment is there, and sometimes it creates a headwind. So a big part of this is having some self-awareness around
Hmm.
maybe how the business started, how it was founded, and maybe what it's projecting onto the market, and then determining, well, what does the market want, and then putting the issue on the table and talking about it in a very dispassionate way without getting into politics or policy or politicians.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a big challenge, Chris, that a lot of business owners face is, as you said, how overt do you be? And then if you are, what are the risks? Because I mean, today we have, I think, a national or international pastime of recreational anger, where people are just waiting to pounce on things. And I think there's a fear among a lot of owners, say, if I'm too overt, yes, I may do it to attract the audience that I want, but I may be afraid that I'll also attract the negative audience that I don't want, and
Yeah.
how I navigate that.
Well, so the way you avoid risk is you don't get into politics, policy, and voting. And
Mhm.
what you do is you focus on the worldview as liberal or conservative and the associated values associated with those two worldviews. And those values are things like how the two groups have different empathies for different people and things, and how they react when they're fearful or safe, or what their definitions of success and what it means to win. These are all non-controversial things. So what happens is that businesses have an inherent skew in terms of how it projects to a market as liberal or conservative. There's no such thing as neutrality. And that's the most interesting thing. I've
Yeah.
never seen a business project a perfectly neutral image. It does, so staying out of politics is not, that doesn't get you there, because there are value sets that get projected. So like I talked about apartments.com, no one said, oh, we're going to go after a liberal audience. It just kind of happened in terms of the founding and the market and everything else. So, the way to avoid, the risk is simply not engaging in any political topic, and that's easy. And then, using the values to project toward the market that you want, and making it intentional. But and in the book it details 20 different values people can use and select, and none of them touch on politics.
Mhm.
They're simple things like self-moderation and how you show people in marketing as being highly self-expressive versus maybe a little bit more self-moderated, or and it goes on and on. So I think it can be done in a very non-controversial way. And there's an X factor in all of this, which I really enjoyed. I did not expect, which is when you study this topic, you're forced to actually study the other side, whichever side that is. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what side you're starting from. And you end up learning a lot more about the other side than you ever imagined, because none of us have any incentive to learn about the other side. But if you're in business and you want to learn about your market and your customers, that's incentive to learn more about both groups and why they buy what they buy.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, and also what you just said there about being intentional, and I would say also if you add in authentic too, with
Yes.
those values, because I think I think where people get skeptical sometimes is when you see brands or companies hop what seems like hop on the bandwagon, and suddenly
Hmm.
they have bumper stickers all over their websites, like trying to say we're really this, and it comes off as not really authentic. It comes off as a little bit, if you like, just trying to take
Knee jerk.
advantage, knee jerk, or trying to take advantage of a
Yeah.
situation. So I think the authenticity piece is really critical, and not trying to be what you actually aren't.
That's right. That's right. And I think, what one of the most fascinating outcomes of my research was how much the worldview culture of a business, so like whether it leans a little bit more liberal or conservative, tends to come from the founders.
Hmm.
Target's a great example, founded by this fairly liberal family in Minnesota. And then, like on the Home Depot side, you have these two kind of co-founders, but the one who managed it for the longest time was more conservative. And it's just interesting to me that all this happens kind of without people deciding to do that. It's like a natural outcome. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's more human nature, right, for this to happen. And what's interesting to me is, like, you'll have examples of innovative startup companies like in the San Francisco Bay Area who are projecting a very liberal worldview, who then are successful with early adopters who happen to be more liberal people, but then hit a wall because they can't transition toward a bigger market where more conservative customers are, who tend to wait and see that a product is proven and reliable before they jump in. There are always exceptions to this. This doesn't
Sure.
explain everybody, but there are some interesting market dynamics that happen, and being aware of them and understanding how to talk to them while being authentic, as you say. I totally agree with that. You're not going to just be out there saying things that the organization can't believe in, but you've got to get it on the table in terms of, like, at the very least, how, like, are your customers more liberal or conservative? I mean, that can be a real eye opener. I mean, I've looked at data from a fairly well-known women's shoe company that projected a fairly strong liberal image based on the value sets and all the research that's in the book. And they had 3 retail locations: New York, San Francisco, and Seattle. And when I looked at the customer data, it was actually a pretty strong majority conservative. And so there's this disconnect, right? But no one asks this question. Very few businesses know if their customers are more liberal or conservative. I didn't look at it for decades in my marketing career. And so this becomes a new insight that you can apply in strategy, that helps you create a better fit between your business and your market. And to your point, but do it in an intentional, authentic way, not something knee jerk.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. We just even take that example of the women's shoe company, right? They could very easily alienate their customer base without inadvertently, without knowing it, because they weren't aware of, say they weren't aware of
That's
their
right.
customer base, and say they decided to push something a little bit more overtly. And then we've seen examples of this, with companies when they start to go a little too overt, or kind of
Yeah.
feel like they're pushing a point of view, and then they alienate. I mean, that's a great example. You could literally almost alienate your customer base without knowing it, because you don't know your customer base.
Yeah. And that alienation becomes a headwind,
Hmm.
okay, for the business. Like, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's unconscious. Like, it can just be like if you have one particular worldview and you're being presented a product that's framed in the other,
Hmm.
it can simply disappear into the background. You can just tune it out. You may not have any emotional reaction whatsoever. You just sense that that's not a fit for me.
Right.
And I've seen that in talking to people and in reactions. And so the point here is, well, how do you create a tailwind for your business using this? Because all it takes is putting the topic on the table, running some simple analysis that probably costs almost nothing. And you can even just send an email survey to your customers and ask them, like, do you tend to be a little bit more liberal, a little bit more conservative? You don't use political terms.
Hmm.
You say Democrat or Republican or independent or libertarian. You just say, like, what side do you tend to fall on? You don't give them a middle option either, because so many people will pick that because it's an
Right.
easy out. But I think it can be done in a very interesting way. And I think I've had people tell me that it's changed how they think about the two groups by learning about both sides in a deeper way, using business as an incentive.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think it's going to become more interesting as more people discover that these, binary choices don't make as much sense as they once did, and how, I
Hmm.
mean, like I said, you'll have some ideas on one side, some ideas on the other, and people are like, well, that makes sense over here, but this also makes sense, and now I'm a little confused. So I think there's a great opportunity for that going forward. But I think coming back to the essence of what you're saying about is, it's not about politics, it's about values. And I think
Yes.
that's such an important point, because that's something I think everybody can coalesce around, and you can be,
Yes.
okay, this reflects my value, or it doesn't reflect my values, and therefore that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. And the binary aspect that you bring up is really interesting, because the other thing that comes out of the research is that it does feel more binary than it should be, and I think it's a result of digital culture.
Mm,
And it's like I mean, binary comes from digital. The word itself comes from
yeah.
digital technology. And it's so interesting how that it tends to box us into places. And then when you have all the politicians saying what they're saying, it brings the values to the surface much more than you'd normally see. And I think over time that's actually going to die down. But today it's you can't it's hard to wake up in the morning without seeing something that almost forces you to make a decision about what values do I have and where do I fall on this topic, whether you're liberal or conservative.
Mhm.
So the trick is to enter this in a very dispassionate way. And like you said, focus on the values and try to learn something from it. And even step outside of yourself and your own values in order to see through the eyes of the customer and how they look at your company and your products using the values that they have.
Yeah, and I think that's and I think that's another incredibly important point that you've made here for people is that you could well be completely misaligned with your audience, like with your customer base without knowing it. So understanding your customer base will certainly help you avoid what we said is creating headwinds that you don't need. um,
Right.
and also exactly what you said is, I mean, it's unfortunate the world we live in today. I always say the news, and it doesn't matter what news, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, it's not there to inform you anymore. It's there to provoke a reaction from you.
Right.
And so as you said, you can start your day, you look at news, and then you're like, oh, I'm discombobulated for the rest of the day. So maybe that's a great opportunity for, I think in many ways brands should comfort you, right? There should be a positive like connection there, and
Yes.
and you should feel good
Yes.
about interacting with them.
Yeah, and I think that's where the fit comes in, you know. And I think there are instances where you can create a fit for both groups equally, and you can create a fit more for one or the other.
Mhm,
Like if you take a look at an example like IKEA, the furniture
mhm,
store. Well, something like in our analysis, something like 94% of their retail footprint is in very liberal areas.
mhm,
So they have a lot of free reign to basically express more liberal values, because honestly, their customers are going to be more liberal and they're never going to get into trouble with their customers. But then you take a brand like Target, which emanates from a more liberal founding. Their retail footprint is about, I think it's roughly 60% liberal and 40% conservative. So that's when you have this kind of possible conflict of projecting liberal values onto that 40% of their retail footprint. And so then can you do that? Then can you manage that in a way where you take risk down, you focus on maybe values that appeal to both
mhm.
groups, and you become more conscious about, it's like, okay, here's how we were founded, but my gosh, we have this investment, 40% of our real estate is in more conservative areas. How do you reconcile that? And that's an important conversation to have if you want to grow the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, as you said at the beginning, if you can find those shared human values that can appeal to both, or as you said, or you decide that this is my audience, this is my tribe, I'm going to focus 100% here, and I'm going to understand that that's my market, which you said, it's in the US it's a huge market regardless of which side you decide to
That's
focus
right.
on.
That's right. And you can take some examples of like cars, are an easy one,
Mhm,
right? Like the Mini Cooper skews very liberal, but it doesn't make conservatives mad. And likewise, a Dodge Ram pickup truck is far more conservative, or a
mhm,
Lincoln car, but it doesn't make liberals mad. It just, they either one, if you happen to see that kind of marketing or sales material, they can just fade into the background if it's not a fit for you. So the goal there is like, well, let's make sure that you're a fit for where you want to be and create the tailwind for the market that's in front of you, knowing who your customers are.
yeah. Well, as you mentioned cars, it'll be interesting to see the data on Jaguar in the next few years, as they have done a serious pivot, and they would always have you would always have considered Jaguar to be quite a traditional audience, market, and
Yes.
they've gone. So it'll be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to talk to you in a year or two and see how the data comes back on that one.
Yeah. That's quite a pivot for them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they see it as the only way to grow their business is to expand their market. But it does feel like they're risking, taking some risks with their established market.
Yeah. So I always come back to quote Spinal Tap. There's a thin line between clever and stupid. So we'll see which side they come
Yes.
down on in the end.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Chris, this has been fascinating. All of Chris's information will be below this video. But before we go, Chris, do remind people who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of LifeMind.ai, and which actually is a business that came after the book. The book inspired the business, and this idea of looking through the eyes of customers, using their personal values at a business and brand rather than the other way around, examining customers almost like through a microscope. So basically, we help local, regional, and national brands create that fit between their products and the market using personal values. So it's LifeMind.ai, and the book Red and Blue Customers is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I hope people get a chance to check it out. I think they'll find it interesting, and I get really interesting feedback from readers about how it helps them not only in business but navigate just kind of the landscape of how people act today, and understanding the other side better, and them not seeming as crazy as they thought they were, no matter which side you're starting from. And to me, that's a fantastic collateral benefit of it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's fantastic work you're doing. I think this is something that everybody should consider. It's one of those probably hidden opportunities that's staring you in the face that you don't realize if you
Yes.
understand it better.
Yes, absolutely. It's hiding in plain sight, honestly. If we choose to look at it and do it in a way that is dispassionate and productive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, listen, thanks again, Chris. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.